I thought I was walking into the perfect family Christmas morning. Instead, I found an empty house, a dying man nobody cared about, and a note that would change everything forever. Hey, everyone. If stories of family betrayal, hidden secrets, and ultimate justice give you chills, you're going to want to stick around for this one. Trust me, this gets wild. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button because you won't believe how this ends. My name is Sarah. And 3 weeks ago, I discovered that the family I married into had been living a lie for years. What started as a ruined holiday became the most important week of my life and the beginning of the most satisfying revenge I've ever witnessed. Christmas Eve, 2024. I'm driving through the snow-covered streets of upstate New York, my car packed with presents and ingredients for the feast I've been planning for months. My husband Michael's family had this tradition. Everyone gathered at his mother's house, where his stepfather Frank lived. It was supposed to be magical. I'd taken 2 weeks off work from my marketing firm, spent nearly $1,000 on gifts, even bought a new dress because Michael's mom, Catherine, always made these subtle comments about my appearance. You know the type. Oh, honey, that color is so bold on you. But I was determined to win them over this year. After 5 years of marriage, I still felt like an outsider looking in. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway. Completely dark. No Christmas lights, no warm glow from the windows, nothing. My stomach dropped. I used my key. Michael had given it to me last Christmas, saying I was finally family. The house was freezing inside, maybe 60 degrees. And silent as a tomb. That's when I saw him. Frank was sitting in his old leather recliner, wrapped in a thin blanket, staring at me with these incredibly alert blue eyes. He looked smaller than I remembered, frailer, but his gaze was sharp as a knife. "They're gone," he said simply, his voice hoarse but clear. On the kitchen counter, propped against a coffee mug like it was no big deal, was a folded piece of paper with my name on it. My hand shook as I opened it. "Sarah, change of plans. Taking Catherine on a Christmas cruise to the Bahamas? She's been so stressed taking care of Frank. You understand? You'll stay and watch him until we get back January 2nd. Everything he needs is in the medicine cabinet." Thanks, Michael. I read it 3 times. Each time, the words got more unbelievable. "A cruise," I whispered. Frank nodded slowly. "Left Tuesday morning. Didn't even tell me until they were loading the car." I pulled out my phone, hands trembling, straight to voicemail. I tried Catherine's number. Same thing. Then I opened Instagram, and my heart shattered into pieces. There was Michael, tan and smiling on a cruise ship deck, his arm around his mother, both of them holding tropical drinks. The caption read, "Sometimes you need an adventure." Posted yesterday. They'd been gone for 3 days, posting photos of their adventure while I drove through a snowstorm thinking I was joining my family for Christmas. But what made it worse, so much worse, was scrolling through the comments. People I knew, Michael's friends, all commenting things like, "Looks amazing, and you deserve this break." A break from what? I wondered. Then I looked at Frank, really looked at him, and started to understand. "When did you last eat?" I asked. Frank, my voice gentler than I felt. "Yesterday morning, maybe." He gestured toward the kitchen. "Catherine left some soup." One can of soup. For 4 days, I opened the refrigerator, and my anger flared white hot. Empty except for condiments and a carton of milk that had expired a week ago. The medicine cabinet Frank mentioned? 3 prescription bottles, all nearly empty, with refill dates showing they should have been picked up days ago. "Frank," I said, sitting across from him, "how long has this been going on?" His laugh was bitter. Which part? The leaving me alone for days, the forgetting my medications, or the treating me like I'm already dead? Over the next hour, as I made a grocery run and cooked us both a real meal, Frank told me things that made my blood boil. How Catherine would forget to pick up his prescriptions because they were so expensive. How Michael would promise to visit, then cancel last minute. How they'd started talking about him in the third person, even when he was right there. "Last month," Frank said, accepting a plate of the pasta I'd made, "I fell in the bathroom. Couldn't get up for 2 hours. When I finally managed to call for help, Catherine told me I should be more careful because she can't handle the stress of accidents." "Frank, that's not normal family behavior. That's abuse?" He smiled sadly. "I know. I just didn't think my own stepson would be capable of it." That's when he told me about Michael's real father, Catherine's first husband, who died when Michael was 15. Frank had married Catherine 2 years later when Michael was a senior in high school. "I paid for his college," Frank said quietly. "All 4 years. Helped him with his first apartment, co-signed his car loan, gave him the down payment for your place. You know what he said at my 70th birthday party? 'Thanks for everything, but you're not my real dad.' The cruelty of it took my breath away. But Frank wasn't finished. "Sarah, there's something else you need to know about your marriage." He pulled out his phone, surprising me that he even had one, and showed me a text thread between Michael and Catherine from 2 weeks ago. Michael: "Think she'd actually stay and watch him?" Catherine: "She's too nice to leave an old man alone." Perfect opportunity. Michael: "Hope this works. Getting tired of pretending." Catherine: "Just a few more months. The inheritance will be worth it." I stared at the messages, my vision blurring. He's planning to leave me. The cruise isn't with his mother, Sarah. Check his Instagram again. Look closer at the photos. With trembling fingers, I scrolled back through Michael's posts. In the background of one photo, barely visible, was a woman in a red bikini. In another, the same woman was sitting at their dinner table, cropped out of the main shot, but there if you knew where to look. "Who is she?" I whispered. "Amanda, his co-worker. She's been calling here for months, asking for him. Always hangs up when I answer." Frank leaned forward. "They've been planning this for a while, Sarah. The cruise, leaving you here with me, everything. If you're as shocked as I was, leave a comment telling me what you would have done in this moment. Because what happened next changed everything. I opened our joint bank account on my phone. The Christmas bonus I'd gotten from work, $5,000 that I deposited just last week for our future house fund, was gone. Withdrawn 3 days ago, the same day they left for their cruise. He took everything," I said. My voice hollow. Frank was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Not everything. Not yet." Something in his tone made me look up. His blue eyes had taken on a calculating gleam. "Sarah, how would you like to learn the truth about this family?" The whole truth? I should have been suspicious. Should have asked what he meant. Instead, I heard myself say, "Yes." Frank smiled, and for the first time since I'd arrived, he looked genuinely happy. "Good, because we have 12 days before they come back, and I have a lot to show you." That night, Frank led me to his study, a small room I never really noticed before. Catherine had always dismissed it as Frank's boring old banker stuff, but when he unlocked the filing cabinet, I realized it was anything but boring. 43 years in banking, Frank said, pulling out folder after folder. You learn to document everything. The folders contain a paper trail that would have impressed the FBI. Bank statements going back 5 years, showing systematic withdrawals from Frank's accounts. Medical records with notes in the margins. Even photographs, pictures of moldy food left in his room, broken railings that were never fixed, medicines that were supposed to last weeks but disappeared in days. "Frank, this is ... I stared at the evidence. "This is criminal neglect. It's about to get worse." He handed me a legal document, my will, the one they think exists. According to the will, Michael would inherit everything. The house, Frank's. Substantial retirement accounts, his investment portfolio. Everything worth about $800,000. But Frank, I said confused, if you know what they're doing, why haven't you changed it? His smile was mysterious. Who says I haven't? From a safe hidden behind a painting of his late wife, Frank pulled out another set of documents. A different will, dated just 3 months ago. This one left everything to various charities focused on elder abuse prevention. But Sarah, he said, I've been thinking. These charities are wonderful, but they're institutional, impersonal. What I really want is justice that has a human face. He looked at me meaningfully. I want to change it again. Leave everything to someone who showed me kindness when my own family showed me cruelty. Someone who could use the resources to build a better life after escaping a marriage built on lies. I stared at him. Frank, I can't let you do that. I barely know you. You know me better than they do, he said simply. In one day, you've treated me with more dignity than they have in years. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. Over the next 3 days, Frank showed me how deep the deception went. Michael and Catherine hadn't just been neglecting him. They'd been stealing from him systematically, forging his signature on checks, using his credit cards for their own expenses, even selling family heirlooms and pocketing the money. Look at this, Frank said, showing me a receipt. Catherine sold my wife's jewelry collection last month, told me it was being cleaned, made $12,000 and spent it on her kitchen renovation. But the most shocking discovery came when Frank showed me the real reason Michael married me. Your father's life insurance policy, Frank said gently. When he died last year, you inherited $75,000, remember? I nodded. Dad's death had been sudden. Heart attack at 58. The insurance money was supposed to be for my future, maybe a house down payment someday. Michael suggested you put it in your joint account for better management, didn't he? My stomach dropped. How did you know that? Frank handed me another document, bank records, showing that the $75,000 had been moved into an investment account. An account I'd never heard of, in Michael's name only. He's been planning to leave you for months, Sarah. The money was always the goal. That night, I lay awake in Frank's guest room, my whole life reframing itself in my mind. The man I'd loved, trusted, built a life with, he'd been systematically stealing from me while planning to abandon me with his dying stepfather. But Frank wasn't dying as quickly as they thought. I had my 6-month checkup while they were gone. He told me the next morning, Doctor says I'm actually doing better. Could have 2, maybe 3 more years if I take care of myself properly. That's wonderful news, I said, genuinely happy. Frank's expression turned serious. It is. But they don't know that. And they're not going to find out until it's too late. I know this is getting intense, but stick with me because you haven't seen anything yet. The revenge we planned together was absolutely diabolical. Frank's plan was elegant in its simplicity. Michael and Catherine expected to return to a dying old man and a devastated daughter-in-law. Instead, they were going to walk into the consequences of their own cruelty. First, we documented everything. I used my marketing background to create a comprehensive portfolio of their abuse, photos, videos, financial records, even recordings of their voicemails to Frank when they thought he was too sick to remember what they'd said. Then Frank made the new will official, with a lawyer who made house calls and didn't ask questions about family drama. But the masterstroke was the timeline we created. They think they have me over a barrel, Frank explained. They're expecting to come home to crisis, to have to comfort you while I'm on my deathbed. Instead, they're going to discover that their actions have consequences. We spent Christmas Day, the day I was supposed to be celebrating with family, preparing for war. Frank was a lot sharper than his family gave him credit for. While they thought he was just a confused old man, he'd been methodically documenting their neglect and death. Banking teaches you one thing above all else, he told me as we organized the evidence. Paper trails don't lie. People do. The financial abuse was staggering. Over 18 months, Michael and Catherine had stolen nearly $40,000 from Frank's accounts. Small amounts at first. $200 here, $500 there, always with excuses about care expenses or medical bills. But the withdrawals had gotten bolder. Look at this, I said, pointing to a bank statement. They took $2,000 the same day Catherine posted photos of her spa weekend in the Hamptons. Frank nodded grimly. "For my physical therapy," she said. Never saw a therapist. But the medical neglect was even worse. Frank's diabetes medication had been rationed to make it last longer. His blood pressure pills were cut in half to reduce side effects. His prescription for physical therapy after a fall had been canceled because it was too expensive. "I started hiding money," Frank admitted. "Small bills from my Social Security. Enough to buy the medications they wouldn't get for me. That's how I've been surviving." We found Frank's hidden cash stash, $3,400 in 20s and 50s, tucked inside books throughout his study. Money he'd scraped together to literally keep himself alive, while his family stole thousands from his accounts. The psychological abuse was documented too. Frank had started recording conversations after Catherine made a particularly cruel comment about not having to put up with this much longer. The recordings were heartbreaking, his family discussing him like he was already dead, making plans for his funeral while he sat right there. But the smoking gun was Michael's laptop. "He left it here last month," Frank explained. "Said the Wi-Fi at his apartment was down. Never came back for it. With Frank's permission, I accessed the laptop. What I found made me physically sick. Email chains between Michael and Amanda, his co-worker, going back 8 months. They weren't just having an affair. They were planning a whole life together, using money stolen from Frank and me. Can't wait to be free of both of them," Michael had written. 2 more months, and we can start fresh in California." Amanda's response: "Your stepdad won't last that long anyway, right? Then we'll have everything we need." California. They were planning to move across the country together, funded by Frank's inheritance and my father's life insurance money. "There's more," Frank said quietly. He showed me a real estate listing Michael had bookmarked. A condo in San Diego already reserved with a deposit, my deposit. Money from our joint account that I thought was for our future together. But the worst discovery was a text thread between Michael and his mother about me. Catherine: "Think she suspects anything?" Michael: "No, she's too trusting. Keeps talking about wanting to fit in with the family." Catherine: "Poor thing. Almost feel bad for her." Michael: "Don't. She's getting a valuable lesson about not being so naive." They were laughing at me. At my attempts to win their approval, my efforts to be the perfect daughter-in-law. It was all a joke to them. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely, let me know in the comments. Because what we did next was exactly what they deserved. Frank and I worked late into the night, organizing everything into a presentation that would destroy their lives completely. Financial records, medical documentation, recordings, screenshots, everything arranged chronologically to show the pattern of abuse and theft. "You know," Frank said as we worked, "I haven't felt this energized in years. Having a purpose again, someone who actually listens to me. It's better than any medicine." But our real weapon wasn't the evidence. It was something much more powerful. "They think they know me," Frank said with a smile. Harmless old Frank, too sick and confused to fight back. They have no idea who they're really dealing with. Frank had been president of the largest regional bank in upstate New York for 15 years. He negotiated million-dollar deals, handled complex fraud cases, and built a reputation for being ruthlessly fair. The gentle, confused old man act? That had been for their benefit. "Why didn't you fight back before?" I asked. "Because I loved them," he said simply. I kept hoping Michael would remember who I used to be to him. That Catherine would remember I was her husband's choice for a reason. Hope makes you vulnerable, Sarah. But betrayal? Betrayal makes you smart. On New Year's Eve, while Michael and Catherine were posting photos from their cruise finale, a fancy dinner on deck, champagne toasts, celebrating their perfect vacation, Frank and I finalized our plan. They'd be home in 36 hours, expecting crisis and chaos. Instead, they were going to walk into a reckoning, January 2nd. I spent the morning making sure everything was perfect. Frank looked healthier than he had in months. Proper meals, medication taken on schedule, and the spark of purpose had brought color back to his cheeks. But we prepared a different scene for Michael and Catherine's return. "Remember," Frank said as we reviewed our plan one final time, "they expect to find you broken down and me barely alive. Let's give them what they expect to see." At 2 p.m., I heard the familiar sound of Michael's car in the driveway. My heart pounded, but not with the excitement I used to feel when he came home. This was something else entirely. Frank positioned himself in his recliner, thin blanket pulled up, looking appropriately frail. I mussed my hair, removed my makeup, and put on clothes I'd worn for 3 days straight. The perfect picture of someone overwhelmed by caregiving. The front door opened, and I heard their voices, happy, relaxed, completely unburdened by guilt. "Honey, we're back," Michael called out, his voice full of fake cheer. "How's the old man?" Catherine added, not even pretending to care. They walked into the living room carrying designer shopping bags and cruise ship souvenirs, tanned and smiling. The contrast between their obvious joy and what they thought my situation had been was staggering. Michael stopped short when he saw me. "Sarah? Jesus, you look terrible. Has it been that bad?" I nodded weakly, playing my part. "He's been difficult, confused. I barely slept." Catherine barely glanced at Frank. "Well, we're back now. You can go home and clean up." She turned to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Thanks for holding down the fort." "I'm sure. It wasn't too hard. Not too hard." 12 days of what they thought was round-the-clock care for a dying man, and she thought it wasn't too hard. "Actually," I said, my voice gaining strength, "before I go, there are some things we need to discuss." Michael frowned. "What things?" "Frank, you okay, buddy?" Frank opened his eyes slowly, as if waking from a deep sleep. "Michael, you're back." "Yeah, Dad, we're back. How are you feeling?" "Better," Frank said quietly. "Much better, actually." Something in his tone made Michael look at him more carefully. Catherine, busy unpacking her cruise souvenirs, didn't notice the change. "Sarah," Frank continued, his voice getting stronger, "would you mind getting those papers from my study? The ones we organized?" Michael's face went pale. "What papers?" I returned with our carefully prepared presentation, 3 thick folders, and Frank's laptop, queued up to show Michael's email history. "We've been busy while you were gone," I said, setting everything on the coffee table. Catherine finally looked up from her shopping bags. "Busy doing what?" Frank sat up straighter. In his chair, the frail act dropping away like a discarded costume. "Learning the truth about my family." Guys, I wish you could have seen their faces. This is where everything we planned started to come together. "First," Frank said, opening the financial folder, "let's talk about the money you've been stealing." "From me? Stealing?" Catherine laughed nervously. "Frank, honey, you're confused again. We've been helping with your expenses." "Helping?" Frank pulled out a bank statement. "Like when you helped yourself to $2,000 for my physical therapy that never happened, or the $1,500 for medical equipment that never arrived." Michael stepped forward, trying to take control. "Dad, you're obviously upset about something, but—" "Don't call me Dad," Frank said sharply. "Fathers don't abandon their children with strangers so they can vacation with their mistresses." The room went dead silent. Catherine recovered first. "Frank, I don't know what Sarah has been telling you." "Sarah didn't tell me anything," Frank interrupted. "Your son's laptop did." I opened the laptop and turned it toward them. Michael's email with Amanda filled the screen, their plan to move to California laid out in explicit detail. Michael's face went white. "You went through my personal things?" "You left it here," I said calmly. "Just like you left me here. Just like you left Frank here to die while you planned your new life with my father's insurance money." Catherine was looking between Michael and the laptop, pieces clicking together. "Michael, what is she talking about?" Frank answered instead. She's talking about the $75,000 he stole from her. The same money he used to put a deposit on a condo in San Diego for him and his girlfriend. That's not, Michael started, but Frank cut him off. The same girlfriend he's been planning to move in with for months. The same girlfriend who wrote, and I quote, "Your stepdad won't last that long anyway, right? Then we'll have everything we need." Catherine turned to stare at her son. "You told her Frank was dying? He is dying," Michael said desperately. "Look." At him, he's skin and bones. "I was skin and bones because you were rationing my medication and food," Frank replied. "Amazing how much better you feel when you're not being slowly poisoned by people who are supposed to care about you." I opened the medical folder. Diabetes medication cut in half. Blood pressure pills rationed. Physical therapy canceled. Even his food portions were controlled to save money while you spent thousands on spa weekends and restaurant meals. Catherine's defensive posture was cracking. "We were trying to help. Help!" Frank's voice rose with genuine anger for the first time. "You sold my wife's jewelry and told me it was being cleaned. You canceled my doctor's appointments because they were inconvenient. You left me alone for 12 days during Christmas because you were stressed from taking care of me." "That's not fair," Catherine protested. "I needed a break. Caregiving is exhausting." "What caregiving?" I asked. "When was the last time you actually took care of Frank? Cooked him a meal? Helped with his medication? Spent more than 5 minutes talking to him?" The silence stretched on. Frank opened the final folder, the recordings. "Would you like to hear yourselves discussing my funeral arrangements while I was sitting right here? Or maybe the conversation about how much longer you'd have to deal with me?" Michael looked frantically between his mother and Frank. "Okay, maybe we haven't been perfect, but we're family. We can work this out." "Family," Frank repeated thoughtfully. "Interesting word choice. What does family mean to you, Michael?" Michael couldn't answer. "Because to me," Frank continued, "family means love, support, protection. What you've shown me is neglect, theft, and abandonment. So let me ask you something. If we're family, why am I changing my will to leave everything to Sarah?" This is where they realized they were completely screwed. And honestly, it was beautiful to watch. The words hit Michael and Catherine like a physical blow. I watched their faces cycle through disbelief, panic, and finally, cold calculation. "You can't do that," Catherine said, her voice shaking. "I'm your wife. Michael is your son." "Stepson," Frank corrected. "And you're right, Catherine. You are my wife, which makes your betrayal even worse." Michael found his voice. "Dad, you're not thinking clearly. Sarah obviously manipulated you while we were gone. She's been filling your head with lies." "Lies?" I laughed, genuinely amused. "Like the lie that you love me? Or the lie that our joint account was for our future together while you were planning to move to California with Amanda?" Michael's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Frank stood up from his chair, moving with more strength than I'd seen since I arrived. "Let me show you something, Michael." He walked to his desk and pulled out a legal document. "This is my new will, signed and witnessed last week. Sarah inherits the house, the investment accounts, everything." "That's not legal," Catherine sputtered. "You can't just disinherit family." "Actually, I can. Especially when I have documented evidence of elder abuse, financial theft, and abandonment." Frank's voice was calm, professional. "Sarah has a copy of everything, as does my attorney, and the police." Michael went pale. "The police? Elder abuse is a felony in New York," I said. "So it's financial fraud. We filed a report yesterday." That wasn't entirely true. We hadn't filed anything yet. But they didn't know that Catherine turned on me with sudden venom. "You gold-digging bitch! You think you can just waltz in here and steal from a confused old man?" "Confused?" Frank asked mildly. "Catherine, I managed a regional bank for 15 years. I think I can handle my own finances." "You're sick," she protested. "Your judgment is impaired." Frank opened his laptop and pulled up his email. Does this look like impaired judgment? The screen showed correspondence with financial advisors, lawyers, even the IRS, all recent, all clearly demonstrating Frank's mental acuity. I've been preparing for this conversation for months, Frank said. I just needed the right catalyst. Sarah provided that. Michael seemed to realize the magnitude of what was happening. Okay, we made mistakes, but this is extreme. Sarah, you can't possibly want to destroy our marriage over this. I looked at this man I'd loved for 5 years, seeing him clearly for the first time. Michael, our marriage was already destroyed. You just never bothered to tell me. That's not true. Amanda means nothing. She's just a distraction while you stole my inheritance money and planned to leave me with your dying stepfather? I shook my head. No, Michael, Amanda is your future. I'm just someone you used. Catherine tried a different approach. Frank, honey, you're upset. I understand. But think about what you're doing. We're the only family you have. Family doesn't steal from each other, Frank replied. Family doesn't abandon each other. Family doesn't discuss your funeral plans while you're still alive. He pressed play on one of the recordings. Catherine's voice filled the room. How much longer do you think we'll have to deal with this? I'm exhausted, and honestly, it would be easier if you just... The color drained from Catherine's face. That's taken out of context. Is it? Frank asked. Because there are 6 hours of similar recordings. Should we listen to more? The look of pure panic on their faces was everything Frank and I had hoped for. But we weren't done yet. Michael tried one last desperate play. Fine, we haven't been perfect. But Sarah, if you go through with this, you're no better than us. You're taking advantage of a sick old man. I looked at him steadily. Frank isn't sick, Michael. He's been playing sick because that's what you expected to see, what you wanted to see. Frank nodded. Amazing how much better you feel when people aren't poisoning your food and stealing your medication. But your doctor said, Catherine began. My doctor said I could live another 5 to 10 years with proper care, Frank interrupted. Proper care that I've been giving myself for months while you thought you were slowly killing me. The room fell silent as the implication sank in. You're not dying, Michael said slowly. Not anytime soon, Frank confirmed. Sorry to disappoint you. Catherine's mask finally slipped completely. So what? We're supposed to take care of you. For another decade? I have my own life, Frank. I'm only 62. I'm not spending my golden years as a nursemaid. There it is, Frank said softly. The truth. Finally, Michael was staring at his mother in horror. Mom, you can't mean that. Don't be naive, Michael. I married Frank because he was stable and comfortable. I did my duty for 12 years. I deserve better than watching him decline. The cruelty was breathtaking. Frank nodded as if this confirmed something he'd long suspected. Sarah, would you mind calling my attorney? I think we need to accelerate our timeline. What happened next unfolded like a perfectly choreographed dance of justice. Frank's attorney, Margaret Winters, arrived within an hour. A sharp woman in her 60s who'd known Frank professionally for 20 years, she wasted no time with pleasantries. Mr. Harmon, she said, setting her briefcase on the dining table, I've reviewed the evidence you sent over. This is one of the most clear-cut cases of elder abuse I've seen. Michael and Catherine sat on the couch like defendants awaiting sentencing. What evidence? Catherine demanded Margaret open her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. Financial records showing systematic theft totaling $47,000 over 18 months. Medical records documenting deliberate neglect of prescribed treatments. Audio recordings of family members discussing the victim's death as a convenience. She looked directly at Catherine. And testimony from neighbors who witnessed your verbal abuse and physical neglect. Neighbors? Michael asked weakly. Mrs. Peterson from next door has been very helpful, I said. Apparently, she's been documenting Frank's deteriorating condition for months. She was prepared to call Adult Protective Services herself. Frank nodded. Amazing how much people notice when they're actually paying attention. Margaret continued with professional efficiency. The new will is ironclad. Mr. Harmon was evaluated by 2 independent physicians who certified his mental competency. The financial transfers have been completed and are irreversible. What financial transfers? Catherine asked, though her voice suggested she was afraid to know. Mr. Harmon's assets have been moved into an irrevocable trust with Sarah as the primary beneficiary, Margaret explained. The house, the investment accounts, everything. Michael stood up abruptly. This is insane. We can contest this. You can try, Margaret replied calmly. But given the evidence of abuse and theft, I'd advise against it. You'd only be spending money you don't have on a case you can't win. Money we don't have. Catherine asked. Frank spoke up. Did you think I wouldn't notice the charges on my credit cards? The condo deposit in San Diego? The cruise you just returned from? He pulled out more bank statements. You've been living off my money for months while planning to abandon me. Unfortunately for you, those accounts have been frozen pending investigation. Of financial elder abuse, the reality was sinking in. Michael and Catherine had been living beyond their means, counting on Frank's inheritance to solve their financial problems. Now they had nothing. Where are we supposed to live? Catherine asked, genuinely panicked. That's not my problem anymore, Frank replied. You have 30 days to vacate the house. 30 days? Michael protested. That's not enough time to. It's more than you gave me, Frank interrupted. You left me with 1 can of soup for 4 days. The karma was so perfect. I almost felt bad for them. Almost got Margaret pulled out another set of documents. These are restraining orders. Neither of you is to contact Mr. Harmon or Sarah, either directly or through third parties. Restraining orders? Catherine laughed bitterly. For what? Financial abuse, elder neglect, and emotional abuse, Margaret listed. The court takes these matters very seriously. Michael tried one last desperate appeal. Sarah, please. We were married for 5 years? That has to count for something. I looked at him, really looked at him. This man who'd stolen my father's insurance money, planned to abandon me, and treated his stepfather like garbage. You're right, Michael. 5 years does count for something. It counts as 5 years of my life I'll never get back. I pulled out my phone and showed him the screen. I filed for divorce yesterday. Irreconcilable differences and financial fraud. Michael's face crumpled. You can't do this to us. We're family. No, I said firmly. Frank is my family now. People who show up when you need them, who care about your well-being, who don't steal from you. That's family. Catherine made one final attempt at manipulation. Frank, honey, I know we've had problems, but 12 years of marriage has to mean something. I was just scared about your health. People do stupid things when they're scared. Frank studied his wife's face for a long moment. Catherine, do you want to know what scared me? Realizing that the woman I loved was counting the days until I died. That every kindness was an act. Every moment of care was performed for an audience of one. Yourself. He stood up, moving to the mantelpiece where their wedding photo sat. I used to look at this picture and remember how happy we were. Now I wonder how long you were just pretending. I wasn't pretending, Catherine protested, but her voice lacked conviction. The day I was diagnosed with diabetes, Frank continued, you asked the doctor how it would affect my life expectancy. Not how to help me manage it, not what support I'd need. How long I'd left. Catherine couldn't meet his eyes. And Michael, Frank turned to his stepson, do you remember what you said when I offered to help with your student loans when you married Sarah? Michael shifted uncomfortably. You said, thanks, Frank, but I'd rather not owe you anything. I thought you were being independent. Now I realize you just didn't want the guilt when you stole from me later. Margaret checked her watch. I'm afraid we need to wrap this up. I have another appointment, and there are still documents to finalize. Documents? Michael asked warily. The police report, Margaret said matter-of-factly. While elder abuse charges are still being considered, the financial fraud is clear-cut. The district attorney's office is very interested in this case. Catherine went pale. Police report? Frank nodded. Everything is documented, Catherine. The theft, the neglect, the abandonment. Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences? But we're family, Michael repeated desperately, as if saying it enough times would make it true. Family doesn't steal $47,000, I said. Family doesn't ration medication to a diabetic. Family doesn't abandon someone during Christmas to go on vacation with a mistress. Margaret packed up her briefcase. Mr. Harmon, Sarah, I'll file the final papers tomorrow. Michael, Catherine, you'll be hearing from the court about your restraining order hearing. After Margaret left, the four of us sat in heavy silence. The house that had seemed so warm and welcoming when I first married Michael now felt like a crime scene. Catherine broke first. So that's it? 12 years of marriage. And you're just throwing me away? I'm not throwing you away, Frank said sadly. You threw yourself away when you decided I was worth more to you dead than alive. And our marriage? Michael asked me. 5 years, Sarah. We had good times. Did we? I asked. Or were you just being nice while you figured out how to steal? From me? Michael couldn't answer. Here's what's going to happen, Frank said, his voice taking on the authoritative tone I imagine he'd used in boardrooms. You have 30 days to vacate this house. During that time, you will not contact Sarah or me except through attorneys. You will not remove anything from this house except your personal belongings, and I have an inventory of everything valuable. What? About our stuff? Catherine asked. Our furniture, The furniture came with the house when I bought it, Frank interrupted. Your personal items are upstairs in boxes. I took the liberty of packing while you were on your cruise. The thoroughness of his preparation was impressive and terrifying. You packed our things? Michael asked, incredulous. I told you, Frank replied. I've been planning this conversation for months. I just needed the right motivation. He looked at me with something like affection. Sarah provided that motivation. Watching someone show genuine kindness to a stranger, while my own family showed nothing but cruelty. It clarified everything. Can you imagine how this felt? Watching two people who had lied to, stolen from, and abandoned us finally face the consequences of their actions? It was better than any movie. Catherine tried one last manipulation. Frank, I'm begging you. I'll do better. I'll take care of you properly. We can go to counseling. Catherine, Frank said gently, you can't counsel someone into loving you. And you can't take back years of wishing someone would die. I never wished you would die, she protested weakly. Frank pulled out his phone and played another recording. Catherine's voice filled the room. Honestly, it would be easier for everyone if he just passed peacefully. Then we could all move on. The silence that followed was deafening. That was taken out of context, Catherine whispered. Was it? Frank asked. Because I have 17 similar recordings. Should we listen to more? Catherine finally broke down, sobbing. But they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of someone who'd been caught. Michael put his arm around his mother, but his eyes were on me. Sarah, please. There's to be a way to fix this. I stood up, suddenly feeling lighter than I had in years. Michael, some things can't be fixed. Some betrayals are too deep, some lies too fundamental. I walked to the window, looking out at the snow-covered yard where I'd once imagined bringing my future children to play. You know what the saddest part is? I would have loved you through almost anything. Addiction, job loss, illness, anything except this. Except what? He asked. Except discovering that you never loved me at all. 6 months later, I was sitting in the same living room, but everything had changed. The house felt different now. Warmer, more lived in, actually loved. Frank was in his garden, something he'd never been allowed to do when Catherine controlled. The household budget. Too expensive. She'd always said about his gardening hobby. Now he spent hours out there, healthier and happier than I'd seen him since we'd met. The legal proceedings had been swift and decisive. Michael and Catherine had tried to contest the will, exactly as Margaret had predicted, but the evidence against them was overwhelming. The financial fraud charges had been dropped in exchange for full restitution. They'd had to liquidate everything they owned to pay Frank back. Catherine had moved in with her sister in Ohio. Michael had crawled back to Amanda. But apparently, she wasn't interested in a relationship with someone who came with legal troubles and no money. Last I heard, he was working at a car dealership and living in a studio apartment. As for me, I'd never been happier. "Sarah," Frank called from the garden. "Come see what's blooming." I joined him outside, where his vegetable garden was thriving. Tomatoes, peppers, herbs, all the things Catherine had said were too much work for someone his age. "The doctor says gardening is the best therapy for someone with my condition," Frank said, beaming with pride. Physical activity, fresh air, purpose, who knew? We'd settled into an easy routine. I worked from my new home office. My graphic design business was thriving now that I wasn't being sabotaged by a husband who wanted me dependent on him. Frank had his gardening, his reading, his weekly card game with neighbors who actually cared about him. Any regrets? Frank asked as we sat on the porch swing he'd had installed in spring. I considered the question seriously. About the divorce? About exposing their abuse? About taking the inheritance? Any of it? No, I said firmly. Not one, Frank nodded. Good, because I have something to tell you. He pulled out a letter from his pocket. From my attorney. The investigation is complete. I opened it, scanning the legal language. They want to interview us for a documentary about elder abuse, Frank explained. Our case has become something of a landmark. Apparently, the evidence we compiled is being used to train social workers and legal professionals. The idea that our experience could help other people in similar situations was overwhelming. What do you think? Frank asked. I think, I said slowly, that we have a responsibility to tell our story. How many other Franks are out there being slowly poisoned by families who see them as burdens? How many other Sarahs are being deceived by people they trust? And that's exactly what we did. If this story helped even one person recognize the signs of abuse or find the courage to fight back, then everything we went through was worth it. The documentary aired 8 months later. Hidden in plain sight, Elder Abuse in American Families won several awards and led to changes in how financial institutions monitor accounts of elderly customers. Michael and Catherine both declined to be interviewed. Frank and I became reluctant celebrities in the elder rights community. We spoke at conferences, consulted with law enforcement, and helped develop new protocols for detecting and preventing elder abuse. But the best part was simply living well. Frank lived another 4 years, not the months Michael and Catherine had been counting down, but 4 full rich years. He saw me graduate with my MBA, helped me plan my wedding to David, a social worker I met at one of our speaking engagements, and was there when I started my nonprofit organization focused on elder advocacy. When Frank finally passed, it was peacefully in his sleep with people who loved him by his side. His funeral was standing room only, neighbors, friends from the bank, people we'd helped through our advocacy work. Michael and Catherine weren't invited. If you're still watching, thank you for staying with this incredible story. But before we finish, I want to talk about why this matters beyond just one family's drama. Frank's final gift wasn't just financial, though the inheritance allowed me to build a life I never could have imagined. His real gift was teaching me that family isn't about blood or obligation. Family is about showing up, caring genuinely, and treating each other with dignity. The Frank Harmon Foundation for Elder Justice has helped over 3,000 families in the past 5 years. We've trained bank employees to recognize signs of financial abuse, educated healthcare workers about neglect indicators, and provided legal support for elderly people being mistreated by their own families. Every case reminds me of Frank's words, Justice isn't about revenge. It's about making sure the truth has consequences. Michael eventually reached out, about 3 years after Frank's death. He wanted to make amends and be part of the family again. I didn't respond. Some bridges once burned should stay that way. Catherine sent a card when Frank died, with a message about putting the past behind us. I donated it to our foundation's files as an example of how abusers continue to minimize their actions even after facing consequences. The truth is, they never understood what they had lost. Frank wasn't just a source of inheritance money. He was a man with decades of stories, wisdom earned through experience, and love that he was desperate to share with people who would appreciate it. Their loss became my gain, in every sense. That matter, Dot. I want to end with something Frank told me shortly before he died. Sarah, the best revenge isn't making people pay for what they did wrong. It's living so well that their choices become irrelevant. Today, I'm married to an amazing man who values kindness above everything else. We have 2 children who knew their Grandpa Frank through stories and photos. Our home is filled with laughter, garden vegetables, and the kind of love Frank deserved, but never got from his blood family. Michael and Catherine's betrayal, which seemed so devastating at the time, led me to a life infinitely better than anything I could have built with people who saw me as disposable. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the best thing that ever happened to you. You just have to be brave enough to see the opportunity hidden in the betrayal. Thank you so much for watching this incredible story of betrayal, justice, and ultimately redemption. Frank's courage in fighting back against his abusers changed both our lives forever. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us share more stories about people who fought back against injustice and won. And here's the most important part. If you know someone who might be experiencing elder abuse, or if you're in a situation where family members are treating you as disposable, please know that you're not alone. There are resources available, and there are people who will fight for your dignity and worth. Check the description below for links to elder abuse hotlines, legal aid organizations, and the Frank Harmon Foundation's resources. Sometimes all it takes is one person who's willing to stand up and say, "This isn't acceptable," to change everything. Share this video with someone who needs to hear Frank's message. You deserve to be treated with respect and love, regardless of your age or situation. And if the people in your life can't see your worth, maybe it's time to find people who can. What part of this story hit you hardest? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one, and Frank's story continues to help people every day. Until next time, remember, the best families aren't always the ones you're born into. Sometimes they're the ones you choose, and who choose you back. Don't forget to ring that notification bell so you never miss our latest stories of justice, karma, and people who refuse to be victims. See you in the next one.